WandaVision is the brand new 2021 MCU Miniseries. It's been releasing every Friday on Disney Plus for the past 8 weeks, and I've had a lot of fun watching this show. It features Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda Maximoff and Paul Bettany as Vision, playing their roles inside of a sitcom. And this show was a lot of fun, and today I'm going to be talking to you about every episode of the show. I'm going to be reviewing each episode, and then I'll be giving you my overall thoughts of the show and then my ratings at the end. If you've not seen WandaVision, though, I will be saying spoilers in this review. You have been warned. And let's get into the show, because I had a lot of fun watching this. But let me know what you think in the comments down below of WandaVision before I get started. Let's start off with episode 1 that takes place in the 50s. And I loved how every episode of this show took place on a different decade of a sitcom. It's a well-known thing that this show has done, and it's really, really interesting because I like sitcoms quite a bit. I find them very, very funny, and sometimes I find them quite annoying. So having the laugh track, having it filmed from one side in black and white in the specific aspect ratio, having dialogue being said like that, everything like that was done marvelously. The craftsmanship of this show was done and set up in a way in the first episode that made me immediately love the show. This was immediately to my liking. And what this first episode did brilliantly was set up not only the fact that they are in this sitcom, set up the fact that this is a romance show between Wanda and Vision, but also set up a mystery. When is this taking place? What's happening to these good characters? Vision died at the end of Avengers Infinity War, so what's going on? And why are they living in this sitcom? What is going on? It's a very interesting mystery, and it sets up everything in such an interesting way, especially in this first episode. We have a really intense dinner party sequence, and obviously things are going wrong. It's really fun. Down to the music, the cinematography, everything is done superbly to make it feel like it was created in the 1950s for television. It is masterful, by also having the little sprinkles of the MCU in there to give us a bit of the mystery. Moving on to the second episode, Don't Touch That Dial, I thought was another phenomenal episode. This was set in the 60s. It probably had the most catchiest theme I've ever heard. It was amazing. It shows Wanda and Vision trying to sort of settle in to this sort of new town, Westview, that the sitcom is taking place in. And I found that really, really funny. They're trying not to use their superpowers within the magic show and using their superpowers at the same time to do this. There's some very funny humour with Vision in this episode. It's done so well, and I really have to talk about these performances. Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen absolutely are relishing in their roles, not just with the humour, but also with the suspense and the emotion, and also the fact that they're really creating performances that feel like the performances that were directed to be performances from the specific era that they are filming in. It is genius. Not only writing a direction, but performances on their part as well. And the second episode set up even more of the mystery at the end of the episode, where things start to mesh up. We see something that obviously Wanda and Vision see, and it goes all the way back, and we have the in color. It's messing things up, and it's really setting up this array of really complex mysteries and different things that are going on. Wanda hearing something on the radio. All these different interesting things are set up in such a brilliant way, and it's also so well done. I loved the second episode really, really much. I liked it just a little more than the first episode. Moving on to the third episode, again, we had another sitcom episode in the 70s, now in colour. Wanda is giving birth to twins, and this was the episode to me where the mystery fully reached its pinnacle, and introducing Monica Rambeau's character as well, who is also a bit more suspicious. She knows of Ultron and Quicksilver, and it gets very intense very quickly at the end of this episode, and I love the way this episode ends. But also the comedic value, and the editing was also top-notch. And they do some really crazy things in this third episode that were just insane, and I loved it as well. But then we move into episode 4, which basically is the big exposition dump of the series. It gives us all the answers to all the questions and all the mystery that was set up in the first 3 episodes. It lets us know that Wanda was in fact behind all of this, and in her grief she created this sitcom television, and we'll get more into why she did that later, to of course bring Vision back after all of the grief that she's faced over the past few years. And you understand why she's doing it, but she's presented more as a villainous character in this episode, and it mainly feels a bit more MCU. It follows Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis from the other movies, and Monica Rambeau, who is the little girl from Captain Marvel. I surprisingly really enjoyed all these characters, and even though I wasn't a huge fan of their characters in their movies in the MCU, I quite enjoyed their presence the episode is called We Interrupt This Program for a reason, is interrupting the entire show to give us all the answers. And to me, it sort of took me out of the show for quite a while. It made me back in the MCU. And even though looking back at the series as a whole, this episode was definitely necessary, they could have paced it out in a different way. Because in the next episodes 5 and 6, which were set in the 80s and 90s, those episodes were a lot better in terms of putting together the two storylines. The storylines of the people outside Westview, and the storyline, of course, with the sitcom, with Wanda and Vision. And to me, this episode was probably my least favourite, just because it just blocked the pace of the entire show. Even though the story beats were necessary, they just happened a little too early on, and that was one of my big issues with this show as a whole. But the rest of the episodes I honestly thought were great, and that brings me into the 70s and 80s episodes, which episode 5 was a big surprise. I liked the dynamic between both of the different storylines combining together. That, to me, was when the show was at its best. And these two episodes were fantastic. I loved the Halloween one. And also introducing Quicksilver from the X-Men into this. We'll talk more about him when we get to the finale. But I loved that reveal. It was such a strange reveal, and it sets up multiple things that I thought were very, very interesting. What I also loved about episode 6 was it set up Vision and how maybe he is attuning. Now we know that Wanda is doing everything. Vision starts to get a little, we start to see it a bit more from his side in terms of this person being stuck in this world, not being able to remember what happened to him, feeling trapped within this world, and realizing that Wanda is doing something quite villainous. And I thought that was very interesting, and I thought the tension set up there was great. Unfortunately, there's some of the mystery aspects I thought with Wanda, especially in episode 5, that could have been better off if we didn't already know that Wanda was doing it all. And there could have been just really subtle, great foreshadowing hints. But because we were told this beforehand, it sort of ruins a bit of the mystery. There's no real intrigue left until we get to episode 7. That was one of my favourite episodes of the entire show. This is probably my favourite sitcom episode. Not because I'm a fan of 2000 sitcoms. I love The Office. And this episode had a lot of references to that, which made me very, very happy. I really enjoyed that. I loved the breaking the fourth wall, the talking to the camera, and of course the Agatha all along twist, which was great. I did not expect that at all, and it gave new mystery to the show. It also gave more fantasy to the show. The show sort of felt very Doctor Strangey when it hit this place, and it didn't feel like anything the MCU had covered before, and it felt quite unique. Episode 8 was probably my favourite episode of the whole show. And not because it was fully necessary, but because it added meaning to the show. It added meaning to Wanda's character, and it showed her grief throughout this entire thing. What I loved most about this episode was how it emotionally made you feel about how Wanda is doing this, and why she's doing this. In her grief, this is what she's done. After it shows her losing her parents, losing her brother, losing Vision. And that's a lot of grief for one person. She's lost everything that she's ever loved. And that's why I love that line that Vision says, "What is grief except love persevering?" And that pretty much sums up what Wanda is doing and what she's aiming to do when you understand that purposefully. Because she's watched sitcoms with all of these different things. And the sitcom is like an escape for reality for her. And that attunes to the entire show and entertainment as a whole. And this is what I thought this entire series meant to me. Anyway, I thought the series was sort of a big metaphor for how entertainment is a way that we can lose ourselves in another reality. If that's sitcoms, movies, WandaVision, it's a way for us to leave the grief that we feel in real life or whatever troubles we're dealing with and escape to another reality. But the irony here is that Wanda can create that reality. Wanda can create a reality. So she creates it. And to me, I love that because it makes you question what you're watching. It makes you question what you're feeling, how immersed you are in something. And to me, that was genius storytelling and genius thematic weight that this show gained because of Wanda's entire motivation that relates to your own motivation. It also added a bit more to a backstory that I also loved, and the emotion in that episode was done very, very well. It also hinted more at the Scarlet Witch aspect of it, with the fantasy stuff that I also really enjoyed. There was a mixture of sci-fi, fantasy, romance, sitcom, comedy, all of this stuff together that was great, and then a splash of the MCU, which leads me into the finale, which was basically all-out action. We have White Vision introduced, and Vision, of course, gives that one his memories. We're not quite sure what's going to happen with that later down the road in the MCU. That was sort of a little plot element that was left a bit open. And this episode, to me, was a little disappointing. Not because of the reasons I've seen other people be disappointed with it. To me, it was a little bit of a disappointment to see a show that was so quirky, a show that was so unique and different, a show that felt like it was so fully on its own, to end like a basic MCU property. And to me, this show was at its greatest. This show was perfection when it wasn't restrained to what the MCU were, when it could just focus on these two characters and the mystery and the style of it all. Where this show failed for me was whenever it tried to make a connection with the MCU, whenever it tried to feel like that. And ending this insanely mysterious sitcom with a bunch of action, to me, was a little disappointing, even though the action was good. And to me, I left the final episode a little underwhelmed. If it was a ending to the season, to a first season, then I probably wouldn't mind, because it leaves a few things open. But the fact that this final episode of an entire miniseries leaves things open for other MCU properties to explore, makes it feel like WandaVision isn't complete as its own thing, and now they've gone into the MCU trade. We have to see Doctor Strange 2 or Captain Marvel 2 to get some of these plot things filled up. And to me, that's never a great way to end a series or a thing as a whole, especially when it was something as unique and interesting as WandaVision. Another disappointment I had was Quicksilver. Not that I didn't like the humour behind it, but the fact that they set up this character, they set up this actor as this character, and then he was sort of reduced to a penis joke. I'm not saying I'm surprised by that, because I didn't expect them to do much with Quicksilver. It just feels a little like, why bring him back into the play if you're going to reduce him to that? Where it worked for me was concluding Wanda's arc, concluding her story. I do think she should have faced a little more consequences for the villainous things that she did, in terms of what she did to all these people in Westview. But the emotion she felt when she said bye to her family that she'd created and got the second goodbye to Vision was a really emotional scene. Even though I felt I already had her goodbye with Vision, I felt that remorse there very well, and I'm interested to see what they can do with the White Vision that comes in later down the road, and how that maybe attunes to Wanda. But her coming the Scarlet Witch and all that, I thought was a good way to end the series in terms of her character arc. And overall, I thought WandaVision was a phenomenal, unique, quirky, mysterious tale. It was not only a loving tribute to sitcoms across the decades, but it was also a really investing mystery and had some great character work as well. It sets up things to be explored in other things that I'm not a big fan of, but as a whole, I loved the style, and I loved watching it each week. Episode 4 was a little bit disappointing, and so was the finale, but the sitcom episodes to me, and episode 8 in particular, I thought were absolutely brilliant. I loved WandaVision, the performances, the style, the actual filmmaking and craft behind it. This is a wonderful and unique, not just for the MCU, but for television as a whole. I absolutely adored this show. It was a great time, and I'm excited to see where they're going with it, where they're going with the MCU. But as a miniseries as a whole, I really liked it. I think a few things could have been a bit more fleshed out in the final episode, but overall, it works on an emotional level, it works on a comedic level, and it works exactly for what it's going for. When it's restricted to the restraints of the MCU, it's not as great as it could be, but when it's given its freedom to be this really wacky and weird mystery sitcom with these two extremely likable characters, I find it absolutely just excellent. I really, really love this show. It is marvelous. And I'm going to give WandaVision an A. I'm also going to give this series a 9 out of 10.
Well, I think we handled that well.
Let me know what you think of WandaVision in the comments down below. I also have a Letterboxd linked in down below as well that has loads more movie reviews and stuff like that on there, so check that out if you want to. I really did have a great time watching this miniseries, and I hope you did too. And of course, thanks for watching, and goodbye.